Welcome back to the Gaucho Sports Spot here on KCSB FM 91.9. I am here with Carson Mercier and JD Slajchert promoting his new book, Darling, You're Not Alone, his second book. 4 years ago, we did this exact same interview here at KCSB. You know, we're recording today on Monday, November 7th. This will be played live on the air Wednesday, November 9th. JD, how you doing?
Hey, fellas, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me back. UCSB is home. To all my gauchos out there listening, I love you guys. KCSB has been always in my corner forever, so I'm stoked to be here, man. It's a pleasure to meet you both.
And it's a pleasure to have you. And it is so fitting that you're here today, November 7th, because today is the start of the men's basketball season.
Yep.
They play tonight, 7 p.m. against San Francisco State. All those years here at UCSB playing basketball, and now to be back in a different role, but still just as impactful a role as you were here at UCSB.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the game. I'll be there tonight, cheering, going crazy with all my other Gaucho fans. But it's you know, I mean, my role when I was a player here was sort of the energy bus. I was sort of the guy who kind of was like firing up the boys and bringing lots of energy in practice, and then on game days just trying to support my teammates in any way I could. But it's funny how that kind of side of me bridged into my literature career. And I was doing tons of like public speaking even as just a player before I wrote my first book, Moonflower. And once I'd written a novel, then those speaking events and the opportunity to just kind of bring a lot of energy came back in a big way. And I'm still doing it now, obviously to this day, just running around talking to people. But trying to do just that, just trying to like inspire, give a little more fire to someone who's having a tough day. And I really had that. My origin story really truly is in this building, this school. And that's why it's so special for me to come back, because it was really where all of my career began.
And it's really special for us too. It's very an interesting perspective. We have the UCSB alumni, men's basketball alumni, current UCSB student, and then the Santa Barbara native, Santa Barbara City College golf player here, Carson Mercier.
Yeah.
It's just, I love that, the way that Santa Barbara really unites people from a ton of different backgrounds. Just talk a bit more about like how the community and its roots spreads farther than just this small Central Coast town.
Oh man, I mean, Santa Barbara is the family of this community is unbelievable. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in interviews or gone to places, and that ends up being the thread from me to a magazine or a TV show that I've done. And it's interesting. I was just speaking with someone in the writing community, and kind of introducing themselves to me because they were inquiring about my new novel. And it was funny, and it just sort of naturally happened where I explained like, the reason I am where I am in my career today is because of the really loud 100 people I had in my corner when I first started off from UCSB. And had I not had that support from day one, from the guys who used to run this show 4 years ago when I did the episode here, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And that's why I'm so adamant about returning home to talk to you guys and always circle the wagon to come back here, because it's really my family. And like, the KEY TV people here that do the TV channel, and Mike Clan over at, KKFX Fox, they had me on TV, before I'd done anything, and they were helping me promote my first book and getting me started. And all the people in Santa Barbara that took those chances on me early, I think, are the reason why I'm here and doing it still. So I'm forever grateful.
Santa Barbara, a super tight community, like you mentioned, and you're an energy guy, right?
Oh, for sure, man.
You're years at UCSB playing basketball. You firsthand got to play in the blue-green rivalry game against Cal Poly. Talk to me, like, what was that like? I mean, being that guy that your teammates looked to for energy, the community. That game is one of the biggest games in the community. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's super fun. Like, I probably one of the best moments of my career was playing in that rivalry game. And there's so much about the Cal Poly rivalry that gets me fired up even still to think about. Just because we had so many close relationships with kids on the team there too, and like it was a little bit, it's like up the street. But one of the funnier stories of my whole career was going into my senior night at UCSB in 2018, which was we played Cal Poly at home that season. So it was, it was my last game in the Thunderdome, and I had 100 points exactly in my career going into that game, or so I thought. And one of my teammates actually was able to figure out that I was in fact wrong, and I actually only had 98 points in my career. And I wasn't really playing a ton on this year, my senior year. So I went over to our starters at breakfast, and I was like, yo, fellas, you need to get a steady lead because I need to get in this game, and I have to score one more basket to get 98. And I swear to you guys, that was like the whole motivation for our starters to get, like a 30-point lead. And sure enough, I subbed into the game with like 3 minutes left, and the place was going crazy because I was, they had like the JD heads in the bleachers and everything, and I set a pick for Christian Terrell, and everyone knew of this situation, so they were really just trying to set me up the whole time. And I took a corner bank shot and drilled it, and the place, you'd have thought we just won the Super Bowl. Like, it was unbelievable, and it was like a 35-point game with like 2 minutes to play, and I got my 100th point. And there's this photo I'll have to show you guys of me just holding like the Wilt Chamberlain 100 thing, in the locker room after. And yeah, it's still like gets our, my teammates fired up to talk about it because it was just such a lively thing. But yeah, it happened in that blue-green rivalry game, and it was probably one of the best moments of my career. So.
And you talk about your teammates, and you talk about those connections, and we've already talked about the connection with the community. How is your teammates, the support that they had while you were here, but that support has just grown even more post-career and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself, man. I was just in Oakland doing a speaking event with a former friend of mine from UCSB who teaches at a kind of an institution over there. And I drove up just for the day to do this talk with about 30, 40 kids. And without me even inviting them, 2 of my former teammates showed up. I hadn't seen in like 3 or 4 years, John Green and Jalen Canty. Just knowing that I was in Oakland, seeing it on Twitter, just decided to come and just stand there and, support me in any way they could. And I mean, I remember calling my dad after that and being like, I don't even know what word to describe, how I felt seeing those guys make that kind of effort on such a last minute just to come and stand there. And he said, dude, it's just love, man. That's what it is. And it's moving, guys, to be honest. Like it's so hard for me to articulately describe the feeling I get to see how supportive my teammates are. And I can just say that all I'm trying to do is make them proud, but also the moment I can be there for them, I'm going to be there so massively, because they've continued, as I said, like getting me in there for that bank shot, like those were my teammates looking out for me. So we're still like brothers, and I'd do anything for them.
How have you channeled that into your writing?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think I have in a big way. I think a lot of their support and energy gives me the kind of confidence in myself to write. I think writing is such a uniquely solitary career path that you often can get isolated in your own thoughts, and it can be hard. It can be hard to kind of walk out of that and escape it. But having my teammates who rallied around my first book, Moonflower, so massively gave me the confidence to go into a second book, go and travel the country and talk about it, go into, children's hospitals or burn sites and be a motivating factor for people. I would say more than anything that gives me that confidence that I still lean on, even when they probably don't realize it. Like I said, John Green and Jalen Canty, I hadn't seen these guys in years, yet they were there to support me, and it's like that probably gives me years of confidence for the future, just that one interaction. So The eve before my first book or my second book came out, Darling, You're Not Alone, Gabe Vincent called me at like 11 o'clock my time, which was like 2 a.m. his time. And they had a game that night. I forget who they played, but just to call and wish me congratulations, because technically the book had been released on the East Coast already. And he just said, man, this is unbelievable. You really got another book. And how cool is that, man, to have your brother just call you like that late at night just to celebrate. And I talk to those guys all the time. So
I can only imagine like how special that would feel. Your first book,
Moonflower, yeah.
Moonflower, and now this one, Darling, You're Not Alone. You wrote those by
hand wrote, yeah.
That just seems like this book. I haven't got the chance to read it yet. I certainly will. I got to imagine 400 pages. First one, 400 pages about too. Mm-hmm. Why handwritten?
Yeah, it's something I'm very adamant about. There's a lot of different reasons, and I'm happy to dive into each of them, because I do think it's very important for people to understand that I'm not just some crazy person, but it also is like important to understand the messaging and the sort of I don't know, just I guess sort of the inspiration behind why I do that. But number one, the reason I handwrite is because I get so far ahead of myself, and I think all of us do naturally when we type. Your fingers can go faster than your mind in that way, and you can kind of get too, I don't know, sort of ahead of yourself is the best way I can say it. But when you handwrite, it's such a rote, monotonous process that you actually have to slow down and be very meticulous about each word you select to incorporate into the book you're writing. So I think it just slows me down in a way that really helps me creatively put together a story. And I would say the second reason is I get them I do my first drafts of my novels in an actual book, like a physical moleskin type looking thing. And when I hand write them, I can physically see the progress I'm making as I'm writing. Do you understand? Like, okay, I got 3 pages in today. I wake up the next day and I can see those 3 physical pages, demarcating my process of getting closer to a full novel. And it's like, all right, let's do 2 today, 3 tomorrow. And then like in a week, you've got, 15 pages. And like, if you can physically see that, whereas on a laptop, it's just a blank Word document. I think it's motivating. I think it helps you like see that light at the end of the tunnel. Another reason why is I'm not the biggest technology fanatic. Like stepping out of emails, calls, texts, and having something that's so just kind of pure in that handwriting is freeing for me in a way that's like very healthy, and I think sort of eliminates the distraction of technology. And then another reason is I can do it anywhere, on planes, on buses. I mean, I was writing chapters of Moonflower on the way to Texas A&M, on the flight to Pittsburgh, and all the games we had, man, I was sitting back there just getting a little bit closer. So yeah, there's like a lot of reasons why I handwrite, and I can just tell you that it's not something that was like necessarily accepted by my team like straight out the gate. I like my literary manager, Chris Veronis, who's like one of my best friends I grew up with. He was basically told me, hey, you're never doing this again. Like after my first book we worked together, he's like, this cannot be your thing. But then after I wrote Darling, You're Not Alone, he was like, okay, I guess this is your process and we just got to deal with it. But yeah, I think slowly people have come around to that's just who I am.
Are there days where when you're writing you just have nothing and it goes like for a week on, or is this book something that you kind of had in mind what you wanted to say and you were able to kind of do it with like 2 pages a day or 3 pages a day?
Yeah, I think this is important to talk about, because I think a lot of people assume that everything, like if you're like a novelist, right? And like this is my second book, it's like, oh, it must come so easily to him. Like it's, he's written books before. I don't think that's necessarily true for any writer ever. I mean, you could talk to, I can't speak towards like the J.K. Rowlings or the Stephen Kings of the world, but I can tell you that there's always a lot of crap in there that you write that you just have to work through. And I'm going to get back to that. But what's really important to know about me is I wasn't like a gifted student growing up. I didn't get like A's in my writing classes, or probably not even B's. But I think that's the reason I'm a novelist and a writer, is because I'm not a perfectionist with my work, and I don't get so caught up on like one misspelled word or a paragraph that, you know, maybe doesn't make much sense, and I just keep battling and moving towards the eventual end product that is the novel. And when you're writing, like, to answer your question more directly, I'll have days where I'll be writing for 2-3 hours, and I know everything I've written is bad, but I'll get to that one page that's actually decent, and that's the page that will make it into that book. And the other 7 I wrote before it will just go trash. But you can't get to that page or that paragraph unless you work through the first draft of nonsense. And I was telling a friend, like, sometimes it takes me about an hour of writing to get to actually anything that's relevant and I will be using. So yeah, I think that's just like the mental weightlifting of writing a novel, is like getting through just bad drafts. So
how does the exhilaration of getting that really good page, that really good section, compared to the exhilaration of playing in like a blue-green rivalry game, like just big sports events and with a large crowd?
I'll take the page over that any day. I mean, I think, like, you know, the energy and the sort of adrenaline of playing high-level sports is cool, man, and like it's an amazing part of my past. But that's so much of a team sport. Like, you sort of share that with your brothers and your coaches and the energy of the gym, and it's a little bit more short-lived. Having a good page, that's forever. Like, you talk about someone 4 or 5 years from now reading that, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, and still being impacted by it. Like, you know, my first book, Moonflower, came out almost now 4 or 5 years ago. I still have people that reach out to me and say, hey, I just started it today. You know, the first chapter's awesome. And it's evergreen, man. It lasts forever. And I think that is a really powerful way to spend your time, is dedicating yourself to the art of the written word in a way that will hopefully inspire people.
Do you ever go back to Moonlight or even this book and look at a particular page and think to yourself, like, wow, I wrote that, or any passage or any...
I mean, yeah, man, I tell you this, like, it's very strange reading your own work. It almost feels like when I read it, someone else wrote it. I really can't identify with things once it's like done and complete. And actually, you know, as you guys can imagine, like, it took me 3 years to write Darling, You're Not Alone, and I put so much into that, that once it's done, I actually won't go back and read it again. I've never read Moonflower since it came out, just because I wanted to, you know, almost close that chapter in my own head and not, you know, maybe get too, like, you know, fall in love with what you have done and focus on the next thing. And I think as a writer, you have to sort of put projects behind you, you know, but yeah, it's very weird to read your own work because it's also sort of, there's so much of this idea of like where you were mentally when you wrote certain things. Like I'll give you a good example is, you know, in my new novel, there's a school shooting, and the energy and focus and intensity it took to write that is not something that came easily, and something that I had to really steel myself anytime I was working on to write. And it like took a lot out of me. Like, I told my dad, I can't read that portion of the book even today without like getting teary-eyed. And you know, I think it's such an important thing to write about and talk about, and I'm passionate about it, but I don't love having to relive the intensity of that chapter a lot. So I won't read it all the time. And then there's like really beautiful, warm parts of the book that I'm always like, oh man, don't get all like lovey-dovey on me too. So it's tricky how your mind transports you back to how you were emotionally when you wrote those certain things. So
yeah, so you really just touched on that. It's it's really amazing to see how you combine the vulnerability of these chapters, of these passages, also with the strength and just like the overall conviction that you write with. How do you say that, like, how has that changed from your first book, Moonflower, to now?
I think I've changed a lot. I think that's another reason why I don't really read a lot of my old stuff. It's like it's hard for me to identify JD Moonflower with JD Darling You're Not Alone. They're so different. It's like a different person wrote them, and I'm sure whatever I write next I'll feel the same about too. Is like it's hard for me to find the through line because I think it takes so much out of me to create these things that you almost have to like kill your old self and be reborn again before I feel like I can write again. And you got to like have a clean slate. And I think that's why it took me so long to write Darling You're Not Alone, is because I had to just go through the maturation of Moonflower before I was ready to go again. But it's I used to joke and kind of think like, there's no way I could top Moonflower. Like that was never going to happen. I don't think I'll ever write again, but now I'm confident I've not only done that, but I don't know how I'll ever top Darling You're Not Alone. And I guess I'm just going to have to spend my whole career thinking that my most recent project is the best one yet. So it's going to be tough for sure, but I'm looking forward to that challenge.
How long does the process of starting a new novel start? Like, you've already published 2 books now.
Well, I think it's interesting. Going from Moonflower to Darling You're Not Alone, much harder than I ever anticipated. Now, Darling You're Not Alone into the next is actually, I won't touch on it too much today because there's still a lot to be sort of figured out about my third book. But I'm already 2 or 3 drafts into it, and it became like no problem. And I've actually spoken to a writer who explained to me that writing your first book, that's all you can think about is your first one. And while you're writing it, that's like constantly just your top of mind. But once you write your second, it's hard to silence the voice in your head with all the other ideas. And that's when you really know you're a serious writer, is once you have 2, not just 1. It's like anybody could write 1, but once you get into that second, then the world's wide open. And I agree with that. Like now I find myself having too many different book ideas. And I already started the third one, so.
And it's a really unique opportunity that we have to talk to you today. Your book just coming out officially, as you mentioned, November 3rd.
Yep.
And how is this past weekend?
It's been pretty exhausting. Yeah. No, you can finish your question. I just was sorry to interrupt, but yeah, it's been tiring for sure, man.
And how is this last weekend? You've been doing a ton of stuff with your friends, with your family.
Yeah.
Just, that finally that we're across that finish line. How does it feel just to finally get to that point of this is for everybody now, not just for me?
I think the world deserves it, man. Like I think, my characters feel very real, like real people to me. Like Phoenix is the main character in this story, and man, I would do anything for that kid. Like I consider him like my best friend. And when you're writing, you almost get to have this isolated relationship with them. And once the book is done and you share it with the world, it's almost like you're saying goodbye in a way to that character. And that's hard. It's harder than you think. But how do I feel, man? I feel amazing. Like I think so often in life, there's tragedy. There's a lot of things that can go wrong and impede the opportunity to have a book released. And I almost was like waiting for something to stop me from releasing this book, and just counting down the days. And now that it's finally done, and I feel so incredibly fortunate to have this book now complete and in the world, and it's like a weight off my shoulders. And now I'm just having fun going to places all over the place, just like this, talking to people like you about it. So it's I feel very lucky, man.